And we are live. This is Across the Pond with Addy Ads and Sam Samworth. This is episode 2, sponsored by Crime and Justice TV, the study of criminal justice in a postmodern world, a modern thinker's perspective. And today's topic, today's theme that we are focusing on is the IPP sentence. Isn't that right, Mr. Samworth?
Mr. Samworth.
Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, that's right, mate. Shall I give you my experience?
Yeah, let's just do a really quick
definition
of IPP, and then you can give your experience. So, according to Wikipedia, IPP is imprisonment for public protection.
There's plenty of people out there who have loved ones, family on IPP sentences who know the figures, but basically it was I don't know what it was. It was an abomination. It was a sentence that was brought out based on risk. So if someone at the end of their sentence still or was believed to pose a risk, they could keep them inside indefinitely. It also come with a 99-year license. If anyone's watching this, when we get things slightly wrong, that's unintentional. I haven't studied it. I can only talk about my own experiences. So the first prisoner I dealt with personally was on an IPP sentence. He was in for robbery and he got an 18-month sentence. 7 years later, he was still trying to get out of prison. This lad personally had a portfolio. Every prison course he could possibly take, every one he had done, some of them twice and some of them 3 times. Now, when you go into prison, again, I've never worked at this end, but pretty much every prisoner has a sentence plan. And something else they used to do was like an OASIS report. I don't know what that stands for. But if the sentence plan works properly, then over the period of incarceration, risk should come down. So if you're taking coursework that is part of your sentence plan, as you complete that work, your risk to the public should come down. Definitely. So this guy, he eventually got out at 7.5 years. So that's 6 years above tariff. He was out about 3 months, and he was sent to a hostel. Do you know what a hostel is, Addy?
I do, yes.
Right, okay. So again, incredibly, in our justice system, people will have loved ones, families on the out, but probation service insists on sending them to a hostel. This hostel was an infamous hostel in a town called Bury, or Bury, depending on which part of the country you come from. And it was infamous because everybody who went there got breached, which means basically they get sent back to prison. Recall. So this lad, after serving 7.5 years, 6 years over tariff, got caught having a couple of pints of beer. He then got sent back to prison for another 2 years for having a drink.
Outside.
So part of the conditions of hostels, you may be drug tested or tested for alcohol. Now, if I'd been locked up for 7.5 years, maybe I'd want a pint. Who knows? But because somebody has a drink, is that really a reason to send them back to prison?
I don't think so. And I do have a clarification question on the hostels. Are these the same as halfway houses? Because I don't believe
very similar.
Okay,
very similar.
Okay, so not a hostel in the sense that it's a public and cheap kind of hotel for travelers. It's more so a halfway house for prisoners and drug addicts, correct?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And these hostels have quite strict terms and conditions. Like I say,
Mm.
the one in Bury was infamous. Pretty much everyone I know who went to that hostel got breached, uh, which means basically they broke their terms and conditions. You know, these hostels, dens of iniquity, really. The targets for drug dealers and that, because we send addicts to these hostels. So you're in a hostel, you might be on a curfew, so maybe 9 while 6 every day you can leave the hostel, yeah? Outside there'd be drug dealers. So you're an addict, you score some drugs, you get drug tested, you're back in prison.
Uh,
You know, we need to be looking at this. And sometimes, you know, like this guy who's already served 7.5 years on an 18-month sentence, did another 2 years. No questions, no arguments, a straight 2 years. So
just
he
for
did
having
nine
a
and a half
fight.
years. Yeah, terrible.
Yeah.
Um,
It is, and I think that's something I definitely didn't realize either. Is you can basically be recalled for anything.
this is true. Um, there's one lad, I remember him coming back in, this isn't an IPP. When I saw him, I said, "You told me you weren't coming back." He says, "Mr. Samworth, I was 10 minutes late for a probation appointment." Yeah. He had to travel across town on public transport. There was an accident somewhere. He said, "I phoned the probation office. I told them I may be late. I arrived 10 minutes late. You
Mm.
know, the probation officer said it wasn't a problem. 2 days later, knock on the door, police, arrested, sent back to prison." And he actually had a letter that stated he'd been sent back because he was late for a probation appointment. Don't get any
Wow.
simpler than that.
Why would they do that, Sam? Speaking from someone who has worked on the inside as, someone who was a guard, why would, because somebody listening to this is not going to understand the logic behind that.
I don't understand it. I've
Mm.
worked there. I don't understand it. If you've got a drug addict, if part of the terms and conditions are if you use drugs, you're going back to prison, you're going to fail. No
Yeah.
questions.
Hmm.
The other thing is, if you're a drug addict or anyone leaving prison, if you've got family, whether that's parents, uncle, auntie, partner, yeah, somebody who's willing to have you at home or live back at home or live with them, do you think someone stands more chance living with a family member than being in a hostel of
Mm.
keeping their head down and keeping out of prison?
Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer.
So why wouldn't you send them? I've seen people fight tooth and nail. I remember one lad who we had on the healthcare, 8 months before his release date, he was trying to get back with his dad. His dad said, "I want him back at home. You know, I'll keep him off the streets." Letters, probation, you know, constant. He ended up going, well, not funnily enough, but he ended up going to that hostel in Bury. Within a month, he was sent back to prison for something and nothing.
Wow.
So
And as I said before, this episode is sponsored by Crime and Justice TV. Our theme today is the IPP sentence, imprisonment for public protection. And the CEO of Crime and Justice TV, as I mentioned on our last episode of Across the Pond, is Pepsi Watson, who is on recall on the IPP sentence. As I mentioned, he got recalled in January and he just got moved to a different prison, as I said before, as well. So this is all relevant to anyone who may be paying attention from Pepsi's channel or my channel earlier when I did talk to him. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. Do you have any other knowledge you want to share on the IPP as someone who has so much experience with this, Sam?
um, Well, it's not that I've got experience with IPP. It's just that I've come across people so you can see the frustrations. Um, Two more examples. One of them, um, a lad called Craig. He's no longer with us. He took his own life on Seawing at Strangeways. So, how did I come to know Craig? He was a prisoner I'd seen about the prison. He'd been in Strangeways a good few years. He's another prisoner who was IPP. I think he was about 3 years over tariff.
And
So,
what does over tariff mean, Sam?
right, that means if he got a 4 year sentence, he'd already served 7 years.
Okay,
So
so he was 4 years past
and if he's
his
four, that's his
supposed release
sentence.
date.
He's actually on 7 years already.
Gotcha.
The example after this, like I'll explain a little bit about that process. So he came to us, Craig. He was quite a disturbed lad. He was in his 40s. Not what I would call a real danger to the public, not a violent prisoner, not in for armed robbery or violence or anything like that. It's hard to say petty crime because crime affects everyone. But, he wasn't a rapist or a paedophile or anything like that. That's what I'm saying. Like a lot of prisoners I came across on the healthcare, a very disturbed childhood, had been abused, had been in care quite a lot, which itself is a bit of a joke, isn't it? The word care, and a lot of these kids are vulnerable and abused.
Oh yeah,
That's
definitely.
That's not to say that people who look after kids are all abusers. I worked in a kids home, obviously. So he came to us. He was really, really angry, and he stayed with us about 6 months. The reason he came to us, I don't know whether we discussed this. In prison, they have a document. It's called an ACT form. It stands for Assessment, Care in Custody, and Teamwork. And basically, this document can be opened by anyone if you are concerned about a prisoner, whether it be self-harming or the fact that, they might be suicidal. You open this document, there's a team of people come together, and you make a bit of a plan to support them in prison. And wherever this prisoner goes in prison, this document goes with it, and staff make entries throughout the day and night. That frequency is determined, by how concerned you are about that person. So he's on healthcare because they've opened a document because he says he's going to kill himself. Now, he was with us 6 months. He never said he was going to kill himself while he was on healthcare. I had a lot of chats with him. We had to get him out on his own. We put him what we call on a unlock protocol, which means we needed 2 staff to unlock him, and we unlocked him when nobody else was out. He asked us to do that because he said he couldn't promise he wouldn't assault or hurt anyone who was on there, because when I was on the healthcare, sometimes we had sex offenders, might have paedophiles, rapists, this sort of thing.
And could you explain that, Sam, just for people who may be listening for the first time and don't understand that there is a hierarchy within the prisoners itself, the demographics, right, based on their crimes?
Well, that's right. So sex offenders, paedophiles, rapists, maybe people who, have mugged older people. People see crimes like that as heinous or whatever. So if you've got somebody of that nature, when they come into prison, they will be offered VP status, which means a governor will sign them up and they will reside on a unit with people of similar crimes. So on the vulnerable prisoner unit, you would get rapists, paedophiles, like I said, people who maybe could be murderers, kiddie killers, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It, as we've said before, it's not a pleasant community of people. You know, it's just like it was never for me. I worked on there on overtime, but I would never have chose to work with that demographic. So on the healthcare, it was the only place in the prison where we had normal location prisoners and VPs on the same regime. So, for instance, Mark Bridger, like we talked about the other day, who eventually was convicted for taking and killing a young girl, he was on there with, people who were armed robbers or whatever, people who were mentally unwell. And then you might have some older people who were on there because of their age, who were normal criminals, but, maybe have cancer or something like that. So we had a very small unit with a very diverse mix of people. So when Craig come on there, he knew the mix. He understood why he was there, but he asked us to put him on an unlock. So, there was no opportunity for him to assault someone. And he also didn't want to associate with people of that nature.
That's a pretty high degree of self-awareness for someone in that situation, a prisoner.
Well, I consider myself, my childhood were lucky. We never had a lot or anything, but we were loved. And obviously some people, to be in care and to be abused, we go back to the PTSD or whatever. I can't even imagine what it's like. I do know a lot of these people end up in prison, very sadly. So he was with us 6 months, and he never discussed killing himself. So at some point, he was always going to be moved off that healthcare. It's only a small unit. We had 22 beds. So in order to be moved off, you have to see a psychiatrist or whatever. We used to have regular input weekly, and Craig maybe I'd see a psychiatrist for 10 minutes every 2 weeks or something like that. Plus we made daily observations on him anyway, because obviously he was on this act form. Anyway, his demeanor changed a bit. He had a good month. There was no talk of harming himself or anything like that. He wasn't happy on the healthcare, and it weren't good for him either, because he was on an unlock protocol. He got very limited time out of cell. Maybe an hour's exercise a day and a shower or something like that. And you've also got to look at that. That's not good for people's mindset. Imagine Craig as somebody who's been abused, and he's on a wing locked up with people, associating while he's locked up who are abusers. So there's that aspect of it as well. Anyway, there was a plan to send him back to C Wing, which is a lifers wing. It was a decent wing. It was well staffed, and the staff were happy to have him on that wing. Anyway, he got released. He was sent back to C Wing. A month later, he hung himself.
And you think, obviously this IPP sentence, and sorry about my camera, Sam. I'm having some trouble with that right now. But what was the reason for implementation in the first place? Because it seems that it's gotten to the point where it's doing way more harm than good.
Right, Addy. Like I said, there's plenty of people on Twitter and the like who know far more than me about this sentence. They'll know how many people are still in prison at, I'm thinking it's round about 4,000. It was given out for various sentences from robbery, 18 months, to more serious sentences. And I don't know. I don't know why it come about, whether it was a social experiment.
Yeah.
It's been dead as a sentence for years. Yet they've still got, people who are on this with a license, an indefinite license, with that hanging over them. A normal prisoner, if you got a 10-year sentence, Ade, you might well serve 7. Then you do 3 years on license, which means you're, as it were, monitored, loosely speaking. Once that license runs out, you're a free man. No more probation. You're sort of free of the justice system. As an IPP prisoner, when you're out, there's the potential for you, even 10 years after release, to be recalled and locked back up indefinitely.
Yeah. And does that ever end? I mean,
well, it needs to end now.
yeah,
After
because
this virus is done, I mean, they're now looking. They have just released some female prisoners, which is good. In female prisons, they have mother and baby units, believe it or not. They have a lot of women who go into prison pregnant and have the children whilst in there. Well, they've released some people from these mother and baby units, and also expectant mothers, obviously, because of the risk of the virus.
of course.
They're looking at releasing, like we've said, maybe 10% of the prison population, male population, who are low risk to the public.
Are there IPP female prisoners?
I believe there are, yeah. I don't know how many. Like I said, people will be well up on this. Me, figures wise, obviously, I don't know. If I had a loved one who was inside, I'd know it inside out,
Sure.
like a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
When this virus is done, for me, I don't know how you're going to do it, but head of the prison service, head of probation, somebody from the government minister, they need to get together and they need to quash. If people are over tariff, if they've served the time, maybe give everyone, I don't know, it's just for an example, a 2-year license, release them. Once that 2 years up, they're free of the justice system.
Yeah.
Something needs doing, because you've got about 4,000 prisoners with no light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense because you think the goal is rehabilitation and re-assimilating these guys back and girls back into society, but it doesn't seem to be the goal. And I just did an update video on Pepsi Watson's situation as far as getting recalled. And one of the officers, a female officer, while they were arresting him, said to his face, "We know you're not a bad person." So it's like, why are you arresting him? I don't know. I mean, if people want to look into it more, I will definitely put the description box, the link in the description box. It's the IPP Diaries that, if you want to check that out. And I'm going to post part 2 later today, so be on the lookout for that. But it just, it seems like, and obviously, just listening to what this female officer said, people on the inside do realize that stuff is going on that really shouldn't, right? As far as it pertains to this IPP sentence.
If it is 4,000 prisoners, that's a big percentage of the prison population. So nothing is going to get done while this virus is about. We'll do an update later before we finish, but nothing's going to change. But it's something, once it's gone away with prisons, that they need to rectify. Okay, third example. So I'm going to talk about one of the lads who now is a good friend of mine, yeah? who was an orderly on the healthcare when I worked on the healthcare, who is now out of prison, who is an IPP prisoner.
Really?
So we're going to call him JD, like the drink.
I actually don't.
Jack
JD?
Daniels, come on.
Oh, Jack Daniels. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Come on, Addy.
I'm only half white, Sam, so whiskey's not really my go-to.
So what would your drink be then?
I like the clearer stuff, to be honest. Some gin or I like gin or some like more higher quality vodka. But I'll take some whiskey every now and again. I'm not a connoisseur of it by any means.
Okay, so we're going to call him JD anyway. So JD, let me tell you about him. As a prisoner, yeah. I knew him about the prison anyway. So I went on A-Wing one day, and he's residing on A-Wing. Asked him to come and be an orderly on healthcare. So he was on healthcare in total about 18 months. Yeah. So I knew him really well. The healthcare, if I explain, I've told you it's a very small unit. We have a mixed demographic of prisoners. We could have paedophiles, people like Mark Bridger, older people who are just unwell, and people with severe mental problems. So it is a very diverse mix. As an orderly, I would open them lads at 7:30 every morning, and I would lock them up at 8 o'clock at night. And other than dinner and tea times, they'd be out all the time. A lot of the time on there, they also worked unsupervised. So, they were really trusted people. And to be honest, I saw them and spoke to them more than I did my missus and my daughter, which, is, you can smile, but it is a sad state of affairs that I spend more time. Anyway.
Yeah, it's true a lot of people's jobs, I think. And like we were saying yesterday, in this situation, a lot of children, for example, use school as their safe place. So it's similar in that sense.
Yeah, very, very much so. Very sad. Anyway, I was their personal officer, right? What personal officer scheme? They've had various schemes in the prison service. And when I was on K-Wing, used to have about 12 prisoners who I needed to chat to every week and put a little comment in their file. Yeah, I always did that. A lot of prison officers say they don't have time. Yeah, it's quite a stressful job, and there isn't a lot of downtime, but you definitely have enough time to spend a few minutes writing or putting some notes on the computer about prisoners that are assigned to you. So on healthcare, I think we had 22 beds for patients, and we usually had 3 orderlies, so 25 prisoners. So every week, twice a week, I would put an entry on their files. Might be about the behaviour, the mental state, just general things, just to say how they were getting on, how they were coping, that sort of thing. Now, JD's probation officer, that's probation officer who worked in the jail. They have probation officers who work in the jail who link with probation officers on the outside in the community. So JD had one in the jail and one outside the jail. So his probation officer in the jail, me and this young lady clashed a bit at first with a sort of style of management, as it were. However, it's very difficult to argue with reason, and we ended up getting on really well.
That's good. And is that typical for a prisoner to have more than one parole officer inside and out?
Not everyone. It depends on the sentence, depends what they're in for, that sort of thing. Obviously, he's an IPP prisoner. His story is quite incredible, but we certainly haven't got time to go into that. Anyway, so I'd put an entry in every week, and I would actually sit in 3 parole boards, yeah, within the
Oh,
prison.
wow.
Prison officers don't normally sit in parole boards, and that's the only time I've ever sat in one. So I'm just going to tell you a little about the frustrations of an IPP prisoner. Now, the thing with myself putting entries in is his probation officer had an accurate history of his time in prison, because quite often that can affect whether someone is going to get probation or not. So, go on. There you go. Yeah. So, his first probation meeting, now obviously as an IP prisoner, it was either 3 or 4 years already over tariff, yeah. So there's hope that you're going to get out. He'd got a family, children. His partner was supportive throughout his incarceration. I'd spoke to his missus. I knew her quite well. If he ran out of phone credit, and something was going on, or he needed her to come on a visit or book a visit, then, I would make a personal call. As a prison officer at that time, we had our own PIN. So I had to put a PIN number into the prison, the phone in the office, and that call would be recorded against me. The reason they did that is because some prison officers were ringing family in Australia whilst at work for 2 hours and running up horrendous phone bills.
Oh,
Believe it or
wow.
believe it not.
Yeah, I believe it.
Me personally, I had never had 2 hours to phone anyone in Australia, but obviously somebody did. Yeah. So, I spoke to his missus quite a lot. So this parole meeting, we went in it. His probation come to me before. She says he's not going to get out. I says, how do you know that already? Because this parole meeting, it has somebody who's sort of overseeing it. There'd be outside probation, inside probation. I was actually invited to provide some information, and there might have been somebody else there as well. So I said to her, why are we having this meeting? She says, well, it's just, it has to run its course. So we went in. She told me not to tell anything. I've always found, especially with prisoners, tell them exactly as it is. Don't lie to them. And although they might not be happy with what you're saying, they appreciate your honesty.
Yeah, they'll respect the honesty.
I just said, look, JD, you're not getting out, mate. I'm sorry. We'll discuss it after. Let's just go in. So we went in, and basically his outside probation officer had been on the sick for 5 months. So his file was handed over 4 weeks before this parole meeting to another probation officer. That officer was there. She sat down. She said, I've only had this file a month. I don't know him. I can't make a decision on him being released. That was it. Meeting was over and we're out of there.
So because she couldn't make a decision based on only having the information.
It's about risk. She weren't prepared to put anything into it. Yeah? Which is fairly disgusting for me. The fact that this is somebody looking to get out of prison, and for somebody to turn up, and she was very blunt. She just says, I'm not making no decision. I don't know him. Only had this a month. I ain't even read it. So can you imagine how you'd feel if you were looking to get out of prison and somebody's saying that? Anyway, he kept his cool. But we also have to understand that it is now going to be another 6 months before he could get another parole hearing. So he's back on the healthcare.
It seems so arbitrary to me, in the sense that these officers and I guess I don't know if officers, the word, I guess parole officer and these kind of mid-level managers have, it seems, a very arbitrary amount of power over the IPP prisoners in these situations where they can kind of just, based on their whim, select their fate.
It's about risk. It's about risk. As a probation officer, if I tick the box and say, yeah, let him out, yeah, there's a bit of that onus on me. People don't like that. They don't like making decisions.
Yeah.
So The easiest decision is to say, no, I think it's still a risk. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one thing that confuses me and other people, and speaking as an American, it's something that I do observe, but it doesn't hit as close to home. Although I think we are having similar problems in this country, and that's the fact that as it pertains to the IPP sentence, there are prisoners getting released who it seems are way more dangerous than people that they're keeping locked up, isn't it? Like, for example, the London Bridge attack last year. Why was that guy released? That doesn't make any sense at
Right.
all.
Okay. Adi, let me explain. This is only my take on it.
Of course.
The IPP sentence should have been applied to people like paedophiles who will always, bar none, pose a risk to children. Yeah? So you should be able to monitor those people and, if there's any signs, bam, they're back in prison. The other people that maybe it should apply to are terrorists because there's always going to be a certain amount of risk.
I agree. Yeah, and it seems that I don't know. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist or anything. That they release certain prisoners with the knowledge that they will get in trouble to set up a situation where you can take advantage of the event in the news politically after the fact.
Right. Real life in prison, people on normal sentences, they come to end of their time, they're released. A lot of them don't have to sit parole boards or anything else. Yeah? They're out. That's it. That's the normal sentence. So, irrespective of whether you're in for abusing children or part of a plot to blow up whatever, you are released. If you're on a normal sentence, you are released. That's it. It's as simple as that, I think. The problem with paedophiles is they will always pose a risk, always. For me, the sentences with paedophiles and rapists do not fit the crime. If I was to give you examples, you'd be horrified. America's got it right. You abuse someone, you're getting 10, 15 years. You do it again, you're lifed off. I've seen prolific paedophiles on their third sentence in strange ways. So what's that tell you? They'll get 3 years for abusing children, and they're released.
Yeah, it seems to be a huge discrepancy in the damage that people do and the crime and the punishment.
It is. There's also a discrepancy, believe it or believe it not, mate, in actual sentencing. I'll give you, for instance, now, 2 lads who knew each other, and I knew them both well as young offenders at Forest Bank. That's 18 to 21-year-olds.
And this was your, sorry to interrupt, this was your first prison you worked at before Manchester.
That's the first prison. So I saw them as young offenders, 18 to 21-year-olds. Fast forward to about 2012, and they're both in strange ways as Category A prisoners. Category A prisoners, in brief, is the highest security level.
Yeah, that's maximum security for American viewers.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're both in for armed robbery. Yeah. Both took firearms. No one injured. Similar prison histories. One of them is in front of a judge who is known to give light sentences. He's laughing. Yeah. Seriously.
The prisoner.
The other one is in front of a judge who is known to be harsh. Armed robber. Similar histories. This one in front of the judge who gives light sentences got 8 years. That's not 8 years to serve. That's an 8-year sentence, so maybe out in 5. People will know. I don't study that, but he's probably looking at serving 5 or 6. The other one got 15 years. 8 and 15 doesn't compute, mate, does it?
No, it again, it seems arbitrary and based solely on the judge, right?
For me, judges have too much power and they have
Yeah.
the power of discretion. In this
Yeah.
country, quite recently, a medical student, female, whilst drunk, stabbed her partner in the head with a knife. She walked free from jail because the judge said she could have a bright future as a doctor and may well save lives.
I saw this. It was about a year and a half ago, wasn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
and it was, and wasn't she blonde too? Blonde white woman, pretty?
I can't remember. I was just disgusted.
Okay. Let
I
me
was
look it up
disgusted.
real quick, excuse me. Yeah, I remember seeing it and I was just appalled.
You know, that is discretion that they shouldn't have. For me, it should be black and white. You have a sheet of paper, robber with a weapon, 15 years.
Mhm.
Paedophile, whatever. It's not. So within our judicial system, not only have we had different sentences, like your IPP, we also have judges who give out different tariffs and use their discretion, which they shouldn't be doing. That is horrific, that. Because everyone says, and it's very cliched, whether you're from a council estate, a single mother, you know, a drug addict, or a junior doctor, if you stab someone in the head while under the influence, you should be doing time,
Mhm.
not walking free because of your class and your profession.
Do you think that not only her class and profession had something to do with it, but her demographic as well?
Do you mean if she'd have been black, would she have been locked up?
Or a man?
Um, Possibly.
Do you think if she was
I
black or
think
brown, she would have been locked up?
possibly.
I mean,
Who knows?
I couldn't see how she wouldn't have been, even if she was a white man. I think
It's
she.
wrong.
I mean,
You see, it sends out the wrong message to
yeah.
people. You know, there'd have been thousands of people in this country who've seen that and thought, you know, that is wrong. That they should not have that power. It's wrong.
Oh,
She
I
should have
just
been
found it.
locked up. End of.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It doesn't make any sense, and it seems to be something that doesn't really change with humans. And what I mean by that is just the political and like the formalities, right? The going through the system, judge, jury, trial, all that. It's almost takes a back seat to the social sphere and what's going on there. It's almost a formality after the fact.
Of course it is. It's
Yeah.
wrong. You know, it needs to be. The system is overcomplicated. It could be far more simple. You know, give someone a sentence, they serve that sentence, standard license or whatever. You know, so you just look there, what you in for? Guilty, bam, 3 years. What you in for? Yeah,
Hmm.
7 years. And it's like that. As
Yeah.
it
So
is now, horrendous.
she was also a drug addict, it says. And yeah, so the judge, Ian Pringle, said she's an extraordinarily able young lady whose talents mean that a prison sentence would be quote unquote too severe. I mean, this is attempted murder, and she literally has like she has. There's no consequences for this.
It's wrong, isn't it, mate?
Yeah,
Very wrong.
it's insane. It really is insane. But we actually didn't get to a story that we were going to get to. I think it was yesterday, Sam. You were talking about a pretty small lad who was hard to take down because we were talking about the Danny G story as well, and you said you had
I'm going
another
to
one.
come back to him tomorrow and talk
Okay,
about
yeah,
the mental health. We'll
definitely,
do that,
definitely.
yeah?
For sure. And do you have
Right,
any
let's.
knowledge on HMP The Mount? Because that is where Pepsi Watson just got moved. As I said, this episode of Cross the Pond with Addie and Sam Samworth is sponsored by Crime and Justice TV, a modern thinker's perspective on crime and justice.
Not really. All the prisons are much the same now, and a lot are struggling for staff. You know, they're in the news now and again as prison reports come up or whatever, but there's about 450 prisons in England and Wales. The Scottish prison system is separate. So, you know, but why they're moving people, I don't know. So,
yeah, I don't get it either. We can only put out our good vibes and good thoughts towards Pepsi and towards all prisoners who are in that situation. We are nearing the end of our power hour, the end of Across the Pond with Addie and Sam. Again, this is sponsored by Crime and Justice TV. Sam Samworth's book, Strange Ways, is out on Amazon, Hearthstone, anywhere else people can, Waterstones. And is there any other websites?
Amazon Worldwide is probably the best.
Amazon, okay, for sure.
Yeah.
And we will put.
Going back to JD,
yeah, go for
IPP it. Prisoner. His second, sorry, I've just remembered his second parole whilst he was on healthcare. I wasn't involved in that. Yeah, I wasn't invited to that one, but I can tell you how it went, which brings up another interesting story. I've got plenty of interesting stories. So his second one, he basically went into the meeting. Something was brought up by his outside probation officer, and that probation meeting was over, and he then had to wait another 6 months. Yeah. Now, the day he was in that, I was off. So when I come back, he was absolutely fuming. So I went to speak to him, and I'll tell you this little story now, which, you know, it still amazes me to this day. So we're going to bring Mark Bridger into this again.
Okay.
So for people who might not know, he was a high-profile Category A prisoner who took a lovely young girl and killed her. And that as much description as we need to know. You know, I give this guy no credence. The only reason I'm bringing him up is because it's relevant to JD's parole. So I'm on a landing, landing, on the healthcare at Strange Ways, talking to Mark Bridger through the hatch. The healthcare doors had a hatch. So if someone was mentally unwell or kicking off or a threat to staff, you could still serve meals through the hatch and medication. But obviously, you got the door between you and them. So I'm talking through the hatch. The hatch is down. Mark Bridges there. JD walks past. JD, incidentally, is from London originally. He's a Londoner. I don't know whether he was a Cockney, but, you know, there you go. So he says to Mark Bridger, who was from a village in Wales, and I believed was Welsh, he says, "What part of London are you from?" So I looked at JD. I says, "London is Welsh." So Mark Bridges says, "I'm from the whatever estate, which is in London." So I said, "Are you from London?" He says, "Yeah, originally." So I never picked that up on the accent. Jay knew straight away. So he says to him, they mention this estate. He says, "Do you know so-and-so?" He says, "Yeah, my sister married his brother." So this is really strange conversation. So basically, JD had friends on the estate where Mark Bridger was originally from, and his sister married a brother of one of his friends.
Wow.
So that's a weird connection.
Yeah.
You know, I still weren't getting the London thing. I couldn't see it. So that was that conversation over. Sometime later, JD come to me and he was quite upset. So he says, "Can I have a word in private?" And Mark Bridger had told him what he had allegedly done to this young girl. Yeah. So he repeated that to me, and what police were worried about with Mark Bridger and lots of these high-profile trials is that the trials break down. They know he was banged to rights, but if you don't have enough evidence or whatever, there's always a fear that these people will get off or, walk away from court. So I put this on a report, which we were asked to do. Anything to do with Mark Bridger, anything he said, we were asked to, which you would. You know, in prison, you collect information like anywhere else. So I put this in a report, and the security department come back to me, asked me not to tell anyone else, which I never have, you know, the contents of that report. And we had to move JD off the healthcare, which pissed me off because he was a really good orderly. But here's the thing, the police believed that what Mark Bridger told JD was probably quite near the truth. They believed that, but they had no evidence. So if they were struggling in a trial, JD would have been taken to court as a witness for the prosecution. Do we see that?
Yes, I'm following.
Okay. So maybe JD is in another part of the jail away from Mark Bridger for that reason for about 6 months. The day Mark Bridger got moved from Strangeways, within an hour, I had JD back on the healthcare as an orderly. It was that good. As soon as Mark Bridger had gone, I went down to, I think it was A Wing, where he was residing, and I brought him back on as an orderly. Yeah, which I was happy to do. And he actually remained, I think he remained there till I finished. I'm not sure. But like I say, we're good friends now. You know, we chat regular, and he's certainly going to feature in book 2.
Awesome. And are you working
Okay.
on that now, Sam?
Yeah, I am. Obviously, this lockdown has made it a little difficult because, you know, I want it to be a continuation of the first book, connected to the first book, you know, but can't give too much away. You'll have to buy
Definitely.
this one.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, I'll buy both. Definitely, Sam. And
No. I'm sending you a copy. All right.
oh, wow. Thank you. I appreciate it, Sam. And I
All
will
right.
definitely do a book review too, because that is something I'm actually going to start doing on my
Yeah,
channel is doing
good
book
idea.
reviews. And because I've read about half of Sean's books, and I want to read Pepsi's polemic as well and do a review of that too. And so, yeah, definitely. And I'm looking forward to it. As soon as I get it, I'll start it. And yeah, really
Incidentally,
appreciate
while
it,
you're
Sam.
talking about book reviews, a friend of mine,
Yeah.
has just got back to me. I gave him a copy of my book, and he was a bit tentative. I said, "Have you read it?" And he went, "Yeah." I went, "Did you enjoy it?" He went, "No." I said, "Well, that's fine." I says, and knowing him, he's a gentle soul. I said, "Was it too brutal?" He says, "You know, I didn't like reading them things. You
Mm.
know, I don't want to think that things like are in the book happen in real life." So, you know, I said, "Listen, it's not for everybody. You know, it's not Mills and Boons. It's not a fairy tale or a kid's book." So I completely understand that. It is quite brutal. The language used is quite brutal. But, you know, the system itself's brutal, Addy, and it needed to be like that. Okay, so now I'll tell you why his second parole, he wasn't released.
And this
He's
is
outside,
JD.
yeah, JD. So the outside probation used this Mark Bridger thing. They said that JD was getting involved in things that he shouldn't have been, so he posed a risk. So I was quite angry because all I did, I reported what he said and moved him off the wing for the reasons I've explained, and that was used against him to stop him getting parole. That's how petty the IPP system is.
Could you repeat that, please, Sam?
Of this Mark Bridger thing, because Jay had
Mm-hmm.
been moved off the healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, his outside probation said that he was meddling in affairs that didn't involve him because he had the conversation with Mark Bridger, and I reported. So they wouldn't release him. So that made me quite angry because he'd
Yeah.
done
So
nothing wrong.
he and not only had he not done anything wrong, if anything, he had helped. He had helped authorities in terms of
Just
giving
being
evidence
honest,
against Mark Bridger.
listen, it had affected him. He was upset, you know,
I bet.
really upset.
Mm-hmm.
you know, the fact that this guy thought because he was from the same part of London that he could, you know, put on him or whatever, or trust him,
Yeah.
you know, but it sickened him to the core.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just
Well,
waving to the missus. She's just got up. She was having a little nap, bless her. She's on a day off.
definitely. Well, we'll wrap up, Sam. That is it for episode 2 of Across the Pond. This was sponsored by Crime and Justice TV, the study of criminal justice in a post-modern world, a modern thinker's perspective. CEO Pepsi Watson. I will be putting all of Pepsi's links in the description below, since this episode is sponsored by Crime and Justice TV, as well as all of the links to where you can buy Sam's book, Amazon and Waterstones, and his Twitter link as well. We are going live pretty much every day that we can, in the morning here in America and in the afternoon/evening over in England. So that is it for this episode of Across the Pond. Thank you so much, Sam. And are you willing to do this tomorrow for the
Yeah,
viewers?
listen, we obviously
Definitely.
need to finish the IPP.
Of course.
Yeah, and then whatever you want.
Okay.
Can I just give you a very quick 2-minute update?
Oh, yes, on the coronavirus situation.
I don't know whether you've seen it on Twitter. It's trending.
I haven't. Go ahead.
We've now got police. The government have introduced stricter restrictions. You're allowed 1 daily exercise from your home, shopping, medication, or to or from work, and that's it. There's actually police going around the streets in some areas with vans, with loudspeakers, warning people about leaving their homes for any other reason. I believe, I don't know the whole story, but I believe if you're found to be leaving your home now, traveling unnecessarily, then you will be subject to the court system and you may well be fined.
Oh, wow. So getting stricter and stricter all the time over there. Fortunately, over here, I have not seen that. The only new updates, as far as I've seen, no numbers so far, but I just got a text. It says the unprecedented disruptions affecting millions of Oregonians, I'm in Oregon here on the West Coast, appear to be reducing the transmission of the novel coronavirus between 50 and 70%, which is a great thing. Another piece of news, which is a feel-good story. There was a World War II veteran, 104 years old. Not only did he defeat the Nazis, but he also defeated the coronavirus as well.
Great stuff. That's what we want to hear.
Definitely. Great story, and I think a great note to end on in these dark times. Sam, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy your evening with the missus and your pets. Until tomorrow, brother.
In Yorkshire. Say Yorkshire.
In Yorkshire.
Yorkshire.
Yorkshire, sir.
See you tomorrow, dude.
Cheers, brother.
Take care.